Well, good morning, Inner Circle. How's everyone doing? I am very excited to announce that we are doing Rehab Month this month, and we have our guest host for the month, Mr. Craig Smith, is going to be teaching us how to do rehabs the right way. And the man knows a thing or two about rehabs, has a huge background in large commercial construction projects, and is a pretty dang good rehabber. I love the projects that he does. And my wife does too. She's like, hey, I want to use his colors, get his color scheme for our new house and things like that. So he's definitely got that flair for design, and also has a really good understanding of project construction and construction management and estimating, and just overall getting the job started and completed and on time and in budget most of the time. So really excited to have him be our guest speaker for this month and helping us show us how to do all this kind of stuff. But before we get to him, got a couple of announcements here. We have a Mr. Jason Palliser joining us for Southside Investment Club next Thursday, and very excited to have him host our meeting. That's going to be a great meeting. Looking forward to a lot of folks in attendance. We also have our Rehab bus tour. That's going to be on March, what is that, 21st, I believe. So, yeah, March 21st, I think, is our bus tour. So make sure that you go out to that. As a reminder, all Inner Circle members get to come to all of our events throughout the year, just as an Access Pass member. So you guys get to come to our bus tours, our two-day Find a Fun seminars, and obviously our monthly case studies and speaker series. So make sure you take advantage of that. In April, I have two attorneys that are going to talk about tax lien investing for our main monthly case studies and speaker series in April. Jonathan Beck and Michael Sewell, they specialize in either city or tax sale and tax lien investings. So very excited to have those two gentlemen join us for our April event for Inner Circle, for SSIC. And then also we're going to have them dive a little bit deeper into that at our two-day event for the month of April. So I'm really looking forward to the March and April programs here. We've got a lot of good things going on, and very excited to have some good speakers and topics and information for your guys' enjoyment and learning. So make sure that you come out and participate in those events. Let's see. I think we're just going to go ahead and jump right in here to Craig. Craig, you still on the line?
I'm here.
All right, man. So, just as, I guess a little way to start off on this, no one is immune to having a project go sideways or awry. Is that correct?
It's very correct.
So you have to do a lot of prep work and a lot of due diligence and have a lot of know-how to make sure that you are pushing your project through from evaluations to estimations to hiring contractors to getting them to work to get it all finished and your punch list through and everything. I mean, you got to be pretty on a real rehab project. You can't just set it and forget kind of thing, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, the more planning and prep work you do at the beginning of the project, the easier it's going to make everything down the road. So start off right, make sure you nail your evaluations, you're finding as many items in the house that are going to be issues as you can up front, and then plan for them. Because that's the biggest problem. When you get into a house and you find some issues later on the road that are going to bite you, that's going to take a big bite out of your profit at the end of the job.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately right smack dab in the middle of one right now where didn't do a good job of that on any phase of that, and yeah, I mean it's kind of embarrassing, to be honest, because I kind of know what I'm doing, but it doesn't really reflect it on this particular job. So
it happens, man. It happens on our level. It happens on $1 million projects. It happens on $1 billion projects. It's just one of those things that creeps up, and you just got to have a system in place to get you back on track and figure out where you're at and keep moving forward.
Well, the good news is there is a real way to curb your costs and to curb mistakes and um, to put all the safeguards in place to make sure that, if you did miss something, it's only a $500 mistake or a $700 mistake and not a $5,000 mistake. So that's what we're going to be going over this month, is everything from estimating to evaluating to hiring the contractors and getting those contractors to do the work. I mean, we've laid out a pretty good program for us for this month, and I'm really excited to administer this. Let's start by just saying, who you are, what your background is, how you got here today, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So some of you know, some of you don't. My background is commercial project management and construction. So my college degree was in construction management. Even before college, during high school and in college, I was remodeling, putting floors in, and it's always been in the family, so it's always been a passion of mine. And my DVR and my TiVo is full of This Old House and all of those old repair shows. So I'm kind of a construction geek when it comes to that. I really like to know the ins and outs and the details of homes and how things work, and that's kind of what led me into my construction background in my field. And I worked for 7 years as a project manager for Tarleton Corporation and ARCO, and I did some pretty cool projects with them. I built the Nordstrom at Galleria. I worked on the art museum expansion for a couple years. That was a really cool job. And then I switched over to ARCO and did some more commercial industrial, so I got into some concrete tilt-up buildings, warehouses, and industrial work and whatnot. And all in the meanwhile, I had a partnership with a good friend who was an agent at the time, and it just made too much sense with him being in real estate and me having a construction background. We said, we've got to do something with this, so we slowly started picking up properties and rehabbing them, and bought and hold a few of them, and it just kind of exploded from there. So about a year ago, I decided that I was having more fun doing that, and made the jump, and now this is it. This is what I'm doing full time, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Best decision.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely one of those guys that you can tell really enjoys what you do. You enjoy the creativity of it. You enjoy the freedom. You enjoy just knowing that you're not waking up and going to a job. You're not going to a job every day.
Exactly. I'm sitting here at my home office right now with my slippers and my ball cap on and talking with all you guys about real estate. It's way more fun.
It is more fun, man. And that's, at the heart of it, honestly, because, because this business can chew you up and spit you out pretty quick, man. There's any number of things that could go wrong in a single day that just kind of makes you feel like, crap, man, what is going on? But you got to enjoy this business, and you got to have fun with it, man, because it's an exciting business. I mean, you're basically rebuilding a house when you do a rehab, and that's pretty exciting, man. You talk to anybody. That's why Southside Investment Club grew so quick, so fast over the years, because people love to talk about real estate, So you're doing something that people always want to dream and be a part of, and when you talk to them, at least when I talk to them, I can see their wheels spinning like, oh my gosh, I want to do what you do. And sometimes I take that for granted, like, yeah, we do some pretty cool stuff, man. And people would kill to do some of the things that we get to do on a daily.
Yeah, absolutely. There's never a lack of interest when you're at the dinner table with folks and you're kind of just talking about how things are going and what you're doing. Everybody wants to know about it. It's fun because they watch the TV shows, which we all know is not really even close to reality, but it's still a fun thing to discuss because it's so open-ended, and there really are limitless opportunities in this business to do whatever you want to do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing that gets me is, because my wife watches those shows too, is, they'll buy a $300,000 shell. They'll put $200 into it, make a $100,000 mistake, and they'll still walk away with $150,000 in their pocket. It's like,
right. It just doesn't work that way. And
no.
I haven't talked to anybody in California where maybe they're doing those, but we just don't have those margins, guys, and you can't go into it thinking that you're going to be able to make that up. It's just, especially now, it's so competitive on the buying end for us that you really got to know your numbers and go in making sure you got everything accounted for so that you know your profit's going to be there at the end of the job, especially if this is what you're wanting to do full time.
Well,
you don't have that security net of, well, maybe I only made $4 or $5 grand, but I still have my income.
well, and you said something that was really key there, because you got to know your numbers, and hopefully after this month, we'll have all of us will have a better understanding of what that really looks like and how that really works. But you said that it's becoming more competitive out there, and it is becoming more competitive. But what's funny is if you really know your numbers and you have it dialed in, and you realize that you can't get the margins that you were trying to get last year, or maybe even the year before, at least you know going into a project that, okay, that's fine. I can adjust my numbers and know that I'm still going to be able to make money, because there's very little unknowns that I don't know about this process. So I know my money costs, I know my contractor costs, I know my material costs, and I know that, okay, I want to make 25 on this building, but there's just not going to be a way that I'm going to be able to do it. But I'll settle for $18,000 because I know that I'm going to be able to pull $18,000 out of this property.
Right. I mean, that's exactly right. And throughout the process, you're constantly going to be striving for where can I be more efficient, and efficiency means money savings and money back into your pocket, and where can I get creative and find some savings that maybe I haven't been finding in the past. So that competition necessarily isn't a bad thing. It's going to make you a sharper tool in your toolbox to get your jobs done.
Yep. Very cool. Well, let's jump in, man. Here, let me see if I can't give you controls here. Okay, so you should be able to hit the arrow keys and do all that kind of stuff.
So let's take a look here. It's saying I have controls, but there we go.
Yep.
Cool. So as Nick mentioned, it's going to be a pretty exciting month. I'm excited to be working with you and to kind of share what I found as I go along. And we're gonna take this month and we're gonna break it into different portions of the rehab aspect of real estate. Basically, the rehab aspect of completely turning a home over. So we've been through wholesale month, we've been through some others, so we're not necessarily going to focus on how you find the house or how you comp it out. We're going to assume that you found a good house, you know your numbers on what your ARV is going to be, and you're at the point where you need to go meet that homeowner and look through the house and then develop your plan and see it through. So this first week we're going to be looking at basically the most efficient way to inspect a home, because that's what you're doing. When you show up and you evaluate a home, you have your home inspector hat on. You're going through it from top to bottom and you're identifying any items you may see with it. And then also with that, what are we looking for and why are we looking for it? Why is it important? The second week we'll get into estimating and your construction costs. So how can we accurately capture all the costs that we need to, not from just a repair standpoint, but we also want to make sure we're capturing all of our buying costs. So everything from the title to your inspections to your closing costs, and then we'll get into your construction costs, of course, but even on the back side, you want to get your holding costs, make sure you have everything accounted for, and then your selling costs, because those are often items that are overlooked, and a lot of times when you talk to people who are newer or who haven't been doing this, they don't necessarily know how quickly those costs add up. So we'll make sure that we're capturing all those. And then week 3 we'll get into some project management and then the construction process. So how can we successfully take a house that we've just acquired, kind of break it apart into pieces, and then bid it out and then manage that work to where we get a good product in the end, we get a good value out of it, which in turn puts a good sized profit in our pocket. And then week 4, we're going to see if we can't find a house for us to do a field trip to. Actually, this one needs to be pulled off. I was just talking with Nick this morning, so disregard that. But week 4, we're going to do a field trip. So we're going to go find a house that we're theoretically interested in, and we're going to walk through that house, inspect it, evaluate it. I'll show you how I kind of spend time walking through a house and then work up an estimate on the house and figure out exactly what our purchase price would need to be, what our Mayo would need to be. So when I get to a house and when I'm planning things out and I'm going to review a property that I'm interested in, there's a certain method that I use and basically walk myself through to review the house. You don't want to just kind of walk up to a house not having a method or a plan on how you're going to review it. It's much easier and it's much more efficient if you develop a system to review a house. And if you've ever had the chance to tag along with a home inspector, those guys are probably the most efficient at reviewing and inspecting a house. If you think about it, that's what their job is, that's what they do every day. So they need to be extremely efficient. So kind of the system that I've developed for myself is I start with the exterior. I do basically a complete loop around the outside of the house, look at everything on the outside, and then from there I'll go in through the front door, I'll go down to the basement, do my loop around the basement, check everything that's in there. I'll come back up, I'll hit the kitchen, and then I'll work the first floor, and then if there's a second floor, I'll go up to the second floor. And then I'll just kind of work my way out. So we'll start with the outside and kind of the things that I'm looking for when I show up at a property. So one of the first things that I look at when I get there is I'm looking at the grade of the lot. Now this is important, guys, because 90%, 95% of your water issues are caused by water not being able to get away from the house. So if you have some grade issues that are pushing water back to the house, you can almost guarantee you that there's going to be a water problem at some point in time. You're also going to take a look at your landscaping, take a look at your paving, so your driveways, all of your hard surfaces. You're looking at the concrete for cracks, settling, etc. Take a look at your trees. Make sure you don't have any dead trees in the area. Anything that needs to be trimmed back from the roof. Take a look at your envelope. And when I say the envelope, basically I'm saying any exterior surface of the home. So that's including your roof, your gutters, your siding, your brick, even your windows to an extent. So you're going to walk around the house. You're looking for anything that looks busted, anything that looks out of the ordinary. Tuck pointing on bricks, some loose soffit and fascia. Your gutters and downspouts, are they all attached and functioning properly? Are they pushing the water away from the house? And then also your exposed foundation, your AC condenser, and then your utility connections. And then on top of that, take a look around at the neighbors' houses. What do they look like? Are the fences all upkept? Is a good neighborhood? Does everybody take care of their stuff, or do they have 14 dogs next door with a dilapidated deck that's going to be an eyesore when people review your home? So the two main things that I'm looking for, that I'm thinking about on the outside when I get there, is if it's raining cats and dogs right now, where is the water going? Is there any evidence that there's leaks or potential areas where the water can get back into the house or be trapped against the house? And then secondly, what's my first impression when I drive up and walk up to the house? Does it look nice? Can it be made to look nice? I looked at one yesterday that was an oddball house. It was kind of a Spanish style down in Oakville in a sea of basically brick front ranches with a front entry garage. So it was an oddball house, and it just didn't fit in, and it would have been tough to make it fit in. So we talk about kind of the curb appeal. This is one I looked at a while back. You pull up. It has really good curb appeal already. The guy did an all right job. I didn't end up buying this house. It needed a little bit of work, but he thought he wanted to sell it for cash. We just couldn't come to terms. But you drive up, there's really not a lot that I would have to do to this house to make it look good. As you walk around, you're looking for your water items. So things like this downspout where it attaches to your drain tile to get the water away from the house. Is that connected and working? Or is it disconnected, like the one that's a little bit further back? That little PVC pipe that's coming out, that's a sump pump drain, and it's not connected to the drain tile that needs to get the water away from the house. So they have a sump pump installed, and it's theoretically removing water from the basement, but it's fitting it right against the side of the foundation, and it's going to work its way back down into the house again. So this photo is of a sprinkler system, and if you look closely, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, Nick. kind of right here on the bottom right-hand corner of that copper pipe, you can tell where they had some freeze and it busted the pipe. So that right there tells you that nobody took care of the system. They didn't take the time to winterize it. That section is the only section exposed that I can see that froze and busted. Now I'm immediately thinking, okay, what's going on with the remainder of the system under the ground? Is it possible that they have more issues, more spots that froze and thawed that I don't know about? Take a look at your condensers. This happened to be a big house, so it was a split system unit, one for the first floor and one for the second floor. You'll want to make note of that because if you need to replace it, now you're replacing two systems instead of one. But what the inspectors are going to look for on this is to make sure that all of this brush is cleared away from your condensers. And they're going to look at the age, and they're going to look at the insulation on the condensing lines that go back, and just make sure that it's in basically overall good shape and it's clean and it looks like it's functional. Typically on the outside you'll have a small breaker box or a shut-off, so make sure that that lid's there and functioning. You're not missing fuses and other random stuff that could come back to bite you. Take a look at where your utilities enter.
You know, I'm sorry, I've been totally listening around. I didn't want to step on your toes here, but it's so funny that you mentioned some of these stuff because everything that you're talking about has happened. I've had a personal experience with something like that. If you go back one slide, you were talking about the breakers missing or something like that for those AC people, AC outside box there. One time, actually in the current house that I live in, just a couple months after we had moved in, the AC went out, and so I called the guy who just installed it, and I'm like, hey, it just went out. And he looked all throughout the system, and the last thing he checked was that, and there was a mouse that had crawled up in there and fried himself and tripped the breaker. So you look at that stuff because that was a cheap fix. It was a $30 breaker, you know?
Yeah, and that's one of the good things about really getting to know your house, and even if it's just for yourself, there's a lot of cheap fixes that you can do to really save yourself some money in the long run. So if you spend some time with the guys who are installing your systems, especially if you're going to want to own property and rent it out, I'd say probably 50% or better of the calls that you get, you could probably spend 20, 30 minutes on it, and then you'll be able to take care of it. Save yourself a boatload of money in the end.
Yep. And then this is classic right here.
Oh yeah.
This is classic. That frayed wire for the entry service line. That's classic.
Yep. So there's a couple things you want to note here, guys. Is one, like Nick said, this wire's frayed, which obviously is a safety issue, a fire hazard. You don't want to have that. Typically, you're going to see. Can you see my cursor on the screen, Nick?
I can now. Yes.
Okay. So typically, what you're going to see is this line's going to come from a pole, and it's going to attach with a cable to the house. It needs to be structurally attached so that basically you're not just having wire attached to your house. The wire is not supporting itself. Another thing is if you're rehabbing this house and you're going to put new windows and new siding and everything on, the code now requires you to be a minimum of, I believe, 4 to 6 feet away from any operable window. So whoever your electrician is, he's going to have to put a mast on this and get it up higher, which sometimes means you have to penetrate your roof and your soffit. So that could mean a little bit of an additional cost. It could mean the difference between a $1,000 panel upgrade and a $1,500 or $1,600 panel upgrade. So you'll want to keep an eye on that. Chimneys, this is one that I just got hit on. And it all depends on how picky your inspector is and how high he goes, but at the top of your brick chimneys, you have your clay pipe that is your flue actually, and then you've got your clay surrounding it. You're going to have gaps there. They're going to want to see it filled, so just something to account for. But watch your tuck pointing on the outside of the houses.
Hey, Craig, hold on. Let me stop you right there. If anyone's calling in on a phone, I'm not able to mute you. We have a little bit of background noise. If you could mute yourself, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Craig.
I'm trying. Hang on here. Let me try one thing. Looks like I lost control of it.
All right, try
yeah, you got controls.
There you go.
All right, now we're good. So once we're done with the outside, and does anybody have any questions on the outside, guys? We're kind of blowing through it, but there's a lot of stuff, and I want to keep us moving. So once I'm done on the outside, I'll take a walk in. I try to go in through the front door, and there's one main reason because of that. When people come to look at your house, when you're done rehabbing it, that's how they're going to enter the home. So that's your first chance to get a kind of that first impression once you walk on the inside and decide whether or not the layout feels funky, if there's some things that maybe you need to do a little bit different. You can go in through the garage. A lot of times that'll happen if you're walking to the outside. The owner will take you into the garage. I just prefer to go in through the front door. It gives me a better sense of how the house lays out and how I'm going to basically work my plans to rehab the house. When I walk in the house, one of the first things I do is I'll walk over to the thermostat, and if it's summer, I'll crank it down to make sure the AC comes on. If it's winter, I'll crank it up to make sure that the heat comes on. Because remember, I'm heading to the basement. That's where the furnace is going to be. So I want that thing running when I get down there. So when I get downstairs, I'm going to take a look at the perimeter of the house first. I'll do a quick loop around the foundation. Just look at everything that's exposed. You're looking for cracks, anything bowing in the foundation, anything out of plumb. I had a pretty good talk with Mo yesterday about a house that we looked at that he sent me, and kind of told him what I saw in the foundations. If you find foundation items, don't be afraid to take some photos of it and write some notes and then send it to a foundation guy. He would much rather appreciate the email and the chance to look at it that way and maybe give you a rough estimate, especially if you haven't bought it, than to spend time and actually go out and visit the job site. You're also going to look at your sill plates, your joists for water damage, termites, and I guess termite tubes, so mud tubes. Take a look down at the floor, see if they put in some drain tile, any sump. Is there any water seeping up between the floor slab and the wall? Take a look at your electrical panels. The main thing you're looking for on your electric panels is, does it have a main breaker? Or is it older? Is it a fuse panel? There's a few panels, Federal Pacific being one of them, that the inspectors seem to hit us up on every time. So if you have one of those panels, you may not have to replace it, but more than likely it's going to end up in your inspection report. On your furnace, check your age. The good rule of thumb, the easy way to do this is if you pull that front panel off and you look at the inside of the furnace, there should be a vendor tag, like a manufacturer's tag, and on the serial number you'll have digits on your serial number. The third and fourth digit are going to be your year, typically, on which it was manufactured. So you'll see XX04 and then number XX whatever afterwards. That 04 is going to be the year that it was manufactured. So that'll tell you how old your furnace is. And because we turn the thermostat down or up while we're there, we can check it, listen for any noises, any vibrations. You're going to look for a gas shutoff, make sure that you can turn it off. You're going to want to kind of see if you have any gas smell or anything like that. And then where does it vent? Does it vent up? Does it look like it's going correctly? Does it vent into the flue? Is there mortar and stuff falling out of the brick flue and whatnot? So those are pretty much the items you want to take a look for on those. On your water heater, of course, any leaks are bad. Sometimes you can find the date of the manufacturer, sometimes you can't. Take a look at the vent on these also. And then also, new water heaters will have an expansion tank on the top and dielectric unions. And we have a photo. I'll show you what those look like. And then lastly, check your waste stacks. Are they cast iron? Are they PVC? Are they leaking? Can you get a chance to turn some water on upstairs and let them run for a little bit while you're down there? See if you can find any leaks. Is there any rust on the cast iron? A lot of times you'll see pits and a little bit of light rusting. What you need to know with these cast iron stacks is that they rust from the inside out, guys. The water's on the inside, so that's where the rust is going to occur. So when you start seeing pits and rust marks on the outside, chances are on the inside it's in pretty bad shape. And then a good rule of thumb that I actually learned from Wes on one of my inspections is whatever the age of your home is, if it has cast iron, so if you have a 1965 water heater or a 1965 house and you have cast iron, it's a 50-year-old home, so there's a 50% chance that below the slab you're going to have some issues. That's just a rough rule of thumb. So the older your house is, the more likely you are to have some issues with that cast iron below the slab. For example, my Sharp house was 80 or 90 years old. We ended up finding some issues. We ended up having to replace some of that lateral underneath the slab.
So that's interesting. I've never heard that before. If it's an 80-year-old home, there's an 80% chance that you're going to have to do something with that.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially below the floor slab. I mean, it's just cast iron's metal. It's going to rust out, and as it rusts, it gets thin. And where it's going to rust and get thin the most is where the water's at, kind of right at that water level, which is right at the bottom and on the sides. Mm-hmm. So I personally, before we buy a house, we do a sewer lateral inspection for $159 and try to make sure that they hit as much as they can. Not necessarily really far out. The counties have replacement programs, a lot of them do, but if you got a broken line below a floor slab, that's a pretty hefty bill, and you want to know about it. So this was the basement of Sharp as we started cleaning some things out. So you're looking at that perimeter. Does the foundation need tuck pointing? You can see where the flues go from the furnace and the water heater into the flue of the chimney to get out. Check your column bases, make sure that nothing's rotted away. The steel will rust out, so sometimes you do need to do a little bit of repair on those steel columns. So when I was talking about water heaters and flues, this water heater worked, guys. It was functional. However, the way that they have this flue run, it won't pass occupancy and won't pass inspection. These water heaters need to have what I call like a top hat. There needs to be a gap between the top of that water heater and the flue. So you need to be able to look for that and be able to tell what they did. And basically the problem they had here was the water heater was too tall. They couldn't get their rise from the top of the water heater to the flue. So we bought a short water heater, put it back in correctly. The two nuts on either side, those are dielectric unions. Those are standard. You just need to put those in with any water heater you do now, and then what you don't see is an expansion tank. And watch your blow-off valve. It's a little bit lower. Sometimes those leak, but if it's leaking, it's probably a $30 or $40 repair. It's not as big of a deal. So obviously your furnace, you've got your gas shut off to the left. You've got your electric shut off with your switch on it. You've got your flue coming out the top. You can lift your panel off, take a look at the inside, and check on your date. This one happens to be pretty new. This is at a property that we bought off of Rock Spring at Laclede Station in Watson. Electric panels. This one's fairly updated, but you can see sometimes they're hard to tell where the main breaker is, and you may have to play around a little bit and really look for it. They're not always labeled correctly. The other thing you can look for on the inside of the door, if it's a newer or replaced panel, St. Louis County will put their inspection tag on it. This one had one up here even though it was old. And then lastly, take a look at your wire coming out the top. This was a 1960s home. You can sometimes look at the sheathing and it'll tell you if it's aluminum wire. You look for an AL designation. That's aluminum. It doesn't necessarily mean the house is going to burn down, but sometimes buyers get into the house and they find out it has aluminum wiring. It's a little bit of a scare point. It's obviously been there for 60 years. Nothing's happened, so nothing's probably going to happen.
Well, and that's, if you run into that, that's going to be in certain areas of Florissant, in certain areas of South St. Louis County. Let's talk about that for a second, because that's not, aluminum wiring in of itself is not any more safe or unsafe than copper wiring. The issue is when you put in an outlet that is a copper outlet, or a light fixture that is a copper couplings.
Right, and you're absolutely right. So what Nick's referring to is the devices themselves. A lot of the devices are designed to be connected strictly to copper, and basically you're connecting like metals. So you have copper on your device, you have copper on your wire. What you need to look for when you have aluminum wiring in a home and when you go to replace your electrical devices in the home is you'll see aluminum compatible devices. They're a little bit more expensive. I want to say if you're $2 for a receptacle, you're going to be $2.75 or $3 for a device that's aluminum compatible. But what it'll have is, the easy way to tell is it's got a blue back on it, especially when you're buying new. If it has a blue back on it, that means it's compatible with aluminum.
And
And then also,
yeah,
go ahead,
the
Nick.
reason why that's unsafe is because when two metals that are different touch each other, they start to corrode, and
Correct.
that can lead to the wire getting pulled off the back of that outlet or that ceiling fan or something, and then that could lead to wires touching, starting fires, and that's where the issue is with aluminum wiring. It has nothing to do with the actual wire itself. It has everything to do with the fixtures and things that you plug into it.
Yep, that's correct. And then you can oftentimes look at this main line that comes in. Another good rule of thumb, if this main line is the width of basically one of your fingers, it's 100 amp. If you've got a 2-finger width, it's 200 amp.
Point that out there again, because it wasn't working.
So right here, you can't see it very well.
Okay.
It's your main service line,
Yeah.
your main lead coming in from the utility. If you're a single finger width wide, you're about a 100 amp panel. If you're 2 finger widths or wider, you're at a 200 amp panel.
I did not know that.
Yep.
I always
You
look.
can get real
I
technical
always
and tell
look
you
right
the
here.
wire you need. What's that?
I always look right here, and it'll say it.
Yeah, you can. You can look right there. That's the easiest way to tell, but sometimes it's not quite as evident.
Yeah.
So, especially on older fused panels, that type of panel, where they don't have a main breaker. If it doesn't have a main breaker, you have no idea what size it is unless you can tell from the wire that's coming in.
So all of these things here that we've been, kind of looking at here, furnace, AC, things in the basement, hot water heater, electric panels, and the sewer stacks and things like that. When you're walking through the house, because most of the houses that we walk into are going to have those items, okay?
Yep.
How do you evaluate, or what do we look for to say, okay, I'm going to have to replace this, or this panel right here, I'm going to have to replace, and here's why, or hey, you know what, this is adequate. It's 200 amp service because, like you said, it's 2 finger lengths wide. The service entry, and it's not frayed, and it looks good, and the wiring looks good, and it's an older panel, but it works. So what's a red flag saying this needs to be replaced? What's a red flag saying, or what's a green flag saying, hey, I can just spend a couple bucks and clean this up and make this look good?
Right. So for this panel, for an example, I wouldn't necessarily say that I need to replace it. I would wait and try to get by with it. It's not that old. It's been inspected by the county. It has the tag on it. It's got aluminum wiring, but all the breakers and everything appear to be functional. If you open up the panel and you see a bunch of stuff that's tripped, or if the panel cover's missing, or if you have breakers missing, or if you look at the sides of the panel and it looks like the homeowner's done a bunch of tie-ins that he may not necessarily have been qualified for. And the easy way to determine that is the holes that they knock out on the side, they need to have a special grommet and a clamp to hold that wire in, that Romex, which is that sheath wire. If they don't have that, chances are they didn't know what they were doing and they were in that electrical panel. That's kind of a sign to me that we more than likely will need to replace this. Or if the outside service is like that last photo that we saw on the outside where it's all frayed and nasty and it just looks awful, then yeah, chances are the inside needs to be replaced also.
Yep.
But even some fused panels, guys, if they're clean and they look well maintained, you might not want to replace it. It's been there, it's functioning, and there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just a little bit old. So you may make the judgment call to keep it, use it, and kind of ride it out and see what happens. You just know that on the back end, a buyer may look at it and say, well, maybe we don't really like that, so we may ask for a little bit of a credit on it. Yeah, that's possible, but if you're trying to save money in spots, that's a spot you could save some money.
So, okay, let me ask you.
Yep.
Let me ask you this real quick. So you said, because I guess I've been inside homes with aluminum wiring that I didn't realize because it had that AL designation, like you said, on the Romex wiring, and that I've never looked for that. Again, most of the stuff, a home inspector is, I'll have a walk and talk at the very least with, and they'll point out things like that to me. But
Sure.
do you need a special kind of breaker as well as any fixture or appliance that you hook up to the wire?
For aluminum?
Yes.
I do not know the answer to that for certain.
Or is it a certain type of panel, because the wire is actually connected to the panel? So that panel obviously has to be aluminum wiring compatible.
The last aluminum house that we did, we gutted it out and replaced it all. I've never replaced just a panel with aluminum wiring. So if Wes is on here, he may be able to have a better answer for us. But yeah, I don't have an answer for that one exactly.
No worries, man. Sorry, I didn't mean to stump you. I was thinking about that.
Hey, it happens. I'll add that to my list of things to check on.
Hey, Nick, you taking a question on electric?
Yeah.
That's right. Hey, Craig, do you have any experience on knob and tube in the city? Is there any secrets on that particular issue?
I don't like it. I'm not a huge fan of it.
I know so many 100-year-old houses in the city, though. You mean, like we got one right now we're dealing with, and how far do you go? Do you almost have to, wreck the whole damn, the wall out to get the wire up on the ceiling, that kind of thing?
That's one of the difficult questions that we face, is how far would you take that? I guess my best advice for that would be, when you get in there, if you can buy it and kind of convince them that you're gonna need to replace it, okay, you're in an awesome spot now because you've captured that cost. But like Ray said, there's so much more that goes into replacing all of that knob and tube, because you do need to get into the walls, and we'll get into this a little bit later, the different wall types. And with that knob and tube, it's going to be in a home that's plaster on laths, so it's going to make for a messy repair. What you could do is, if the basement's open and the attic's open, replace everything up to where that knob and tube jumps up into the walls. They can replace it up to there, put a junction box, and then tie onto those lines as it comes out of the, out of the walls into the top of the floor from the basement. And at least you've cleaned it up on everything that's visible. But from a safety standpoint, again, it's been there 100 years plus, and they haven't had any issues with it. So you could argue that it doesn't need to be replaced.
Hey, this is Mike Kincaid. We're in the middle of two projects right now. One of them's in Illinois. We had to do 100% of the knob and tube. Our other one's on the hill. What they recommend in the city is, you're correct, leave your walls alone. Those aren't, your lights and stuff, the watts and stuff that are going in there, it's not really going to affect those, especially on the second floor. But you're going to want to clean up everything that you can that's going to really be getting hit with a heavy load, because it can become dangerous. The city's not going to force you to really do anything, but you're going to probably get hit with a home inspector that's going to tell, either the bank or the buyer that, hey, this has got 100-year-old electrical stuff in it. And that's where we gutted our one on the hill as well, because we don't want to get caught with it on the back end, because if you don't do it, and you can't sell the house, or the bank is trying to force you to do it or whatever, then you're going to be going back into your project, and you're going to be tearing up walls, or you're going to be tearing up ceilings, or you're going to be tearing up floors. It's almost everybody we've spoke to said, you're better off to just tear out at least 90% of it and get it out of there.
Well, and let me tackle that one right here, and then let's make sure that let's try to blow through the rest of this and save questions for the end. But I'm glad you brought that Ray and Michael, that you brought these issues up, because this is exactly the kind of stuff you need to be thinking about. And if you listen to what Craig said to begin with, which was figure that replacement into your cost and just negotiate that with the homeowner. That way you've captured that value, okay? And then it's your decision as to how you're going to do it. And I'd say most of the stuff that I see in the city, most of the rehabs that are not full gut down to the studs, and even removing all the studs and everything, a full gut, they'll rewire everything and replumb everything, and it's not even an issue because they've already figured that they're going to do that. But most of the renovations that you'll see that aren't full guts but are truly, hey, they did a really bang-up job on this, they'll clean it up in the basement and remove all evidence of knob and tube. They'll leave the knob and tube in the walls, and they'll clean it all up in the attic. And if you need to run an AC or you need to run anything, like if you're doing dual zone AC and you're doing or dual zone HVAC and you're doing an HVAC system in the attic, well, they'll run a home run line all the way up there, and they won't tie into the existing stuff. They'll run their own dedicated line to that. So, Mike, you're right. And the thing is home inspectors pretty much they could kill your deal and say, oh my gosh, this has knob and tube, and the house is going to burn down as soon as you move in. They could not. The city's certainly not. At least in the city of St. Louis, is not going to knock you for that. But a lot of buyers think that they can't get insurance on the building. Well, no, that's not correct, because almost every house in South St. Louis has knob and tube in it at some point. There are insurance agencies that will do that. So it's not just the home inspector or the city that you got to look out for. It's also the insurance. Can you get insurance on it? And absolutely, all three of those can be beat pretty easily. The home inspector, if he knows what he's doing, if he sees that the panel was replaced and everything was cleaned up the correct way, he'll note that there is some knob and tube probably in the house, but it looks like it was probably done the correct way. You're probably right to do that in the Hill, to do it that way, just so that you know that if someone does come back and ding you on it, that you're not going to have to go knock through walls and do that and kind of redo it, and you might as well just do it right from the beginning. But I think it's pretty socially and professionally accepted that cleaning it up in the basement, cleaning up the panel or replacing the panel with a new service entry line, and then cleaning it up in the attic so that it's all the stuff that you see is Romex, and the other stuff in the walls could be knob and tube. So
I would agree with that. I'd say that's a pretty good statement, at least what I've seen. And to Nathan's point, your high load lines, so the stuff that's running to your electric dryers, your ranges, and your condensing units, so your ACs, those are stuff that is pretty accessible. You're going to want to run a new line to those.
Yep. Very good.
All right, we'll move on.
Good.
Speaking of basement issues, you'll see some stuff like this from time to time, just some mold growth that's grown up. I would typically, on this scenario, if the basement's clean and empty, go in with a pressure washer. We're painting our basements anyways. Get rid of everything, wash it down, clean it off, repaint it, and just make it go away. There's definitely the varying levels of mold that you can get into, and you'll kind of have to make a judgment call on when to bring the right guys in to abate it. One house that we looked at that I did bring an abatement company in because I wanted them to give me a warranty on the back end is it was listed. It was known that it had a mold issue. It wasn't one that I was buying directly from an owner. So I wanted to have that paperwork trail and the suspenders, belt and suspenders, so to speak, when I went to sell it, that I had documentation that the mold was taken care of correctly. So.
And what did that run you? Just ballpark.
Oh man, I'm trying to think back. This was a big house. I want to say it was like 3,800 square feet, and I had it. It ended up being the best value for me would be they'd come in, put up all of their containment, all their plastic sheeting and everything. I'd have my guys go in, demo out the basement, and then they'd come back and clean and wipe everything down. But I want to say it was probably in the $4,000 to $5,000 range with demo and everything else in my pocket. So figure 6 to 7. Now again, this was a really big house, guys. If you're in a regular 1,000 square foot house and you've just got some surface mold like this on some basement that you need to treat, I would say you're probably going to be closer to the $3,000 range. But if you run into that issue and you have questions about it, take some photos and call the right guys and know the number for sure. Put your inspection clause on your contract and make sure that they know that you're going to want to get that part nailed down before you buy.
Right. It's not a $20,000 fix. I mean, I guess it potentially could be if you got to take all the drywall out of a house because it's just completely destroyed.
Right.
But I mean, that my actual current house too. We had the inspector found some mold, and we had to get it done correctly, and it was like $3,500. But they repainted all the walls for us and everything, and honestly, it was kind of like this. I thought we were just going to pressure wash it and just paint it ourselves, but we got dinged to make sure that we did it correctly, so we hired a company. It was $3,500, but
right.
I would say you're probably in that $3,000 to $4,000 range for doing that. So anyway, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, that's. I mean, I've walked in houses where it's now, and that comment refers to you got a little bit of mold in the basement because that's typically where you're going to see it with your the most moisture in your air. If you get into a house and you walk in and there's a lot of mold upstairs, to Nick's point, that's when it gets really expensive because it can be behind the walls, it can be in the attic, and you just really don't know. At that point, you have to make a judgment call of, okay, is it bad enough that I'm going to gut this entire thing and have it treated and I can account for it and still make money on it, or is it bad enough that maybe it's just not worth the time and I want to walk away and find something else because there's easier fish to fry? All right.
Hey, Craig, who'd you use for a mold? What company?
I'd have to look up their name, Ray. There were two companies that I had come out, and I can't remember either one off the top of my head. It was probably 5 or 6 months ago when we looked at it.
You know, we're working on
I want to say one was St. Louis Mold Remediation or Mold Solutions.
Don't we have a sponsor called Absolute, Nick?
We don't, but we're working on one or two right now. I don't know what the status of that is, but I think we're wrestling around with one or two. I don't know who we used either. I honestly, I can't remember.
Yeah, well, I just tell you, we just use them because they are associated with our company, and a ranch, 1,700 square feet with a finished basement was $6,100. And then last year we did a condo with them. Second floor leaked down to the basement. There was a lot of work there. That was about $5,000. So I would say a good guess would be 3 to 5. You know, based on what Craig did. That's just my experience on it.
Yeah.
I did have one. I did almost buy one at the Legends where in Eureka, the houses in that area were like going for $350 ARV. It was listed at $75,000. I was going, what's the deal? The lot's worth more than that. We went in the building. You had to put a face mask on because it was up in the second floor ceiling. It was terrible. I don't know whatever happened to that house, but he said about $50,000 to fix it. But that was just the mold stuff. So we walked away from that one.
That's where you really need to make that judgment call, guys, because then I'm assuming, and Ray can confirm, the numbers that he's referring to is just to get rid of the mold. That doesn't include your cost to put all the drywall back and piece everything back together. Is that correct? Yeah, so
that's correct.
Your costs can get pretty high there pretty quick.
To sell a house, so you got to get that certification, or you'll never sell the damn thing.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents for the day.
That's a good 2 cents. That's a dime's worth.
Another reason to scare you out of the business. No, just kidding.
That's right. Just sell all your homes to Ray and I. We'll take care of it.
There you go.
There you go. Another good reason to wholesale.
That's right. Anyways, onto the kitchen. So when you're looking at your kitchen, you're looking at the cabinets. Is everything functional and is everything matching? That's kind of the first question that you need to ask. Check the floor of your sink base. Is there any water damage? Is there anything leaking? Turn your sink on and let it run for a while. Look at your appliances. Are they dated? Are they missing? Is everything working? Turn on your gas range if everything matches and they look decent. Confirm that stuff is working. Is there a dishwasher and an over-the-range microwave, or does it need to be added? So here's the key with those. You're going to walk into a lot of houses that don't have a dishwasher and they don't have a microwave. Don't make the mistake of just adding the cost of a dishwasher and a microwave. You need at least 3 trades to put these in if they're not in there already. You're going to need an electrician to run electric to it. You're going to need a plumber to hook up the dishwasher. And then you're also possibly going to need a carpenter to rework your cabinets just to get those in if the cabinets are good and you're keeping them. So watch those items. We talked about the sink. Check for your leaks. Turn it on hot water. Make sure your water heater's running. look for your GFIs on your receptacles at the counter. If there's a door to the garage, typically this is where they're at. They should be solid wood or insulated steel. And if you need to put a new door in that location, guys, those need to be fire-rated doors. They're a bit more expensive than your standard insulated steel door. And then take a look at the layout. Can it be changed? Can it be opened up? What can you do to make it look like a better kitchen? So this is one kitchen we looked at. Obviously, it's dated, old wood cabinets, but I was looking at this as a rental. So really, from my standpoint, I saw it. I said, okay, maybe we'll replace the countertop. I can reuse the sink. The faucet's not bad. The dishwasher might be okay. No utilities are on, but I want to have matching appliances, so I'm going to put a new black range and a refrigerator in, and then make sure all my cabinets are working. This is a fairly clean, straightforward kitchen. It just needs a little bit of fluff and buff.
You know, and I would add there, well, I mean, if I was keeping this as a rental, I'd paint it, and that's about the only thing.
Right, exactly.
I mean, because that looks pretty nice to me.
Yeah, this was down in Oakville, so we wanted to get a little bit more out of the rents for it. So we figured we'd paint the cabinets, maybe put a microwave above the range, and then change the countertop out so it's a darker color, just to make it look a little bit nicer. Here's another Oakville kitchen. Very cramped, kind of a poor layout with them having the dining room in it. This would have been a pretty good-sized rehab, not just because of the kitchen, but because of everything else that was in the house. So when you're in here and you're looking at the kitchen, and if you think you're planning on rehabbing it, take a look at your floor. A lot of times they'll take that floor and run it right up to the cabinets. So you start yanking cabinets out thinking that you're going to reuse the ceramic floor there. Unless you're going back with the exact same kitchen layout, you may end up having to replace the floor also. Getting into bathrooms, again, check your vanities and your cabinets, check the floor of that cabinet. Is there water damage? Are there shutoffs for the faucet and the toilet? Flush the toilet a few times, make sure you don't see any leaks anywhere, no cracks. Try to move it. Wes calls it his potty shuffle. Basically, you put that toilet between your legs and you kind of rock it back and forth. Make sure it's secure. It's
really funny to see him do that too, by the way.
It is pretty funny to see him do that. I think that's his dance move for all the weddings he goes to. And then, how is the floor? Is there any water damage? So the most likely spots that you're going to see water damage, guys, is right where the floor hits the corner of the walls at the tub. That's typically where your shower curtain doesn't go over far enough, your water kind of leaks out and hits the floor, and that's where you're going to see your damage. So make sure you're stepping on those areas, push on it with a pocket knife or whatever you got, make sure it's solid, and then check the floor around your toilet. And then what's the condition of the tub and the tile surrounding it? That photo that Nick showed at the last weekend's, or I guess the last seminar we did, you can reglaze the tile if it's in good shape, guys. I looked at one yesterday where maybe you just have to reset a tile or two, and then you can go in and reglaze the tub and reglaze the tile, and it looks like a new bathroom. So you don't necessarily need to gut them all. I like to save the tubs when I can. It's just a lot easier. And then check the window and the showers. So when you're looking at a window in a shower, you want to be looking at that windowsill. Unless it's been really caulked well and maintained throughout its entire life, chances are that sill beneath it is rotten and moisture damaged. And then turn on your exhaust fan. And if you're going to do a bath reno and a rehab, if you're gutting it out and you don't have an operational window that you can open, county will make you put an exhaust fan in it. And then make sure your receptacles are all GFI protected. So here's an example of a bathroom that we had picked up in a house that we're working on. Basically, when I walked in, I looked at it, I said, okay, it's kind of ugly, what can we do to make it look better? You've got wall panel back here that's not tile, it's just like a kind of a 1/4 inch smooth face luan is what I would call it. It was delaminating, falling apart, so immediately that had to go. Obviously, we don't want a blue toilet and maybe not some blue wall tile, but the floor tile was all in good shape. That was just wood frame, so that was pretty easy to yank out. And then you had a 48-inch vanity over here on the side. So what we did was basically all this tile went. It was pretty cheap. You just kind of peeled it off. It was drywall. Our guy Jose smoothed it out with mud, repainted everything, put a new ceramic floor down, we glazed the tub, and we put a new tile surround in. We probably spent, I'd say under $1,000 on this bathroom, and it looks brand new. We kept the mirror. We spray painted this mirror frame white. I did get a new vanity. The majority of the cost in this bathroom went to a vanity. The difference between a 48-inch vanity and a 24-inch small vanity is pretty high, guys. You can get a pretty cheap 24-inch vanity for $150 from Lowe's. You're closer to $500 and $600 once you get up to these 48-inch vanities. So watch those items. You walk in, you see a big vanity, know that it's going to be expensive. Bedrooms. There's not a whole lot to say about bedrooms other than all your bedrooms need to have smoke detectors, and then you also need a smoke detector in the hallway that leads to the bedrooms and a minimum of one on each floor. So if you're doing a gut rehab, they're going to make you hardwire it, and it's probably going to be $800 or $900 if they have all the walls open to do it. If the walls are closed, you're probably in the $1,000 range to add them in on a 3-bedroom ranch. If you're not doing a gut, they will let you get away with just doing battery operated. And then check your ceiling fans and lights in your bedrooms. If you don't have any, chances are it's got a switched receptacle. When you go to finish this house and you're going to sell it, from an agent standpoint, at least put a lamp in the bedroom so that when we walk in and it's in the evening in the wintertime, we flick the light on, we can see the house. You'd be surprised how many people don't do that. You can't even see the room when it's nighttime. I like to add ceiling light fans if I'm doing a rehab. It just shows a lot better. And then also to legally claim a bedroom, it must be a minimum square footage. I think that varies slightly from city to county, but it also has to have a closet. If you don't have a closet in the bedroom, technically from an MLS standpoint, you can't claim it as a bedroom. And then as far as closets are concerned, open up the doors. Is there shelving inside? Is it missing? Do you need to account for that? And when you're rehabbing and you're going to sell, spend a couple extra bucks and put 2 rows of wire rack shelving in there. You would not imagine the amount of women that we go look at homes with that they walk in immediately they're like, oh, I wish I had more closet space. And they're looking at old homes in the city. You just don't get that, especially on starter homes. But if you can make it seem like they can fit as much of their clothing as possible in that closet, they're going to be much more happy with it.
So we actually have a question about minimum requirements for a bedroom. What are there any minimum height requirements for a bedroom, like specifically in an attic where?
There are, and I just went through this, and I want to say it's close to the 7-foot mark. I'd have to go back and check on it, and this was in the city. The other thing you need to look at when you're in the city and you're doing attics is sometimes you'll see kind of your sloped ceilings in the attics, and they'll take those slopes almost all the way down to the floor or to where it's maybe 2 or 3 feet off the floor. To factor in your actual square footage that the city will allow, they're not going all the way to where that wall is. So where that, I guess where your ceiling meets your wall at that 2 to 3 feet mark off the floor, they're actually going to step it in to where you're at that 7 foot or 6.5 foot mark to where you have that head clearance, and that's where they're going to figure in your square footage. So you may think you have an extra 300 or 400 square feet up there, but you really don't if you're going to get technical about it. So you want to watch that. Hopefully that answered the question. That's not the technical answer, but I got you close. Anyways, bedrooms, doors and windows. So open all your interior and exterior doors. Make sure that those are operational. Do they open and close easily? Do any of the doors look out of whack or uneven? That can be a huge deal, guys, because that can be one of your indicators that you got some foundation or some settling issues. So keep an eye on those. You'll see cracks coming off the corners of doors. Open and close at least a handful of windows. Make sure that they're operational. Look for screens in your windows. In St. Louis County and probably in the city, although they don't look as hard, St. Louis County will make you repair any torn screens that you have to get occupancy. So you will have to fix those. I've gotten by on sunrooms with just yanking the screens out and not having screens on them to get away from it. But on the inside of a house, like the main house, you're probably going to have to do some work there and replace them. Look at all your windows. Obviously, you're looking for cracks, but what you're looking for more is any fogging inside. That would be a broken seal. The inspectors are going to catch this, and they're going to note it in their report, so make sure that you catch it and bring it up with the homeowner. Does your sliding door lock, or are they relying on the old stick in the track of the door? Make sure you can lock that door, otherwise you may have to change the hardware out. Does the garage door open easily? Does it have safety sensors, and are they working? So make sure you're tripping those. I believe to pass occupancy on doors that lead to the outside, you need to have a thumb latch on the inside. You can't just have a key. So some of these old homes, you'll see where they've got a deadbolt, and it's keyed on both sides, inside and out, and people will just leave the key in there. The county and some of those inspectors don't like to see that anymore, and the case is they don't want somebody to be stuck inside in case of a fire. So chances are you may have to change that out, especially if you're going to buy and rent. Odd-sized and shaped doors are expensive, so be careful. Watch out for your arch-top doors in the city, and then also your really short doors and city basements where you can't really get that full height door. So you want to make sure you account for that.
Or you ain't kidding about those arch doors, man. Those wooden doors. You try to go.
Oh yeah.
You try to go replace that door. You're gonna have to take a second mortgage out on your house, and
yeah, I mean you're easily $2,000 plus on those doors.
And this
they're expensive.
It's the same. It's almost the same cost for a screen door as well. It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, yeah. Don't throw away the screen doors either. If you find them in the house, just keep them and put them in a corner and let the future owner deal with them. I'll pull them off if they don't look good, but I won't throw them away. So this is just an example of a broken seal. This is kind of to the extreme of what it would look like, but you look for any fogging on the inside of it. And you'll also see sometimes the seals around the edges will start to kind of peel and warp in. That's a sign of a bad window, and chances are it's going to need to be replaced. Speaking of arch doors, this is the one that was at Sharp before we refinished it. Like Nick said, $2,000 plus to replace it. You can have a carpenter pull the door off and sand it and scrape it down and refinish it and make it look pretty close to new for probably $200 to $400 depending on the level of finishing needs to do. Lastly, we got some flooring. So when you're looking in these houses, get permission to pull up some carpet or pull up a register. See what's underneath there. Do they have hardwood under the floor? I can tell you a pretty good rule of thumb is if it was built in the mid-'70s or later, chances are it probably doesn't have hardwood underneath. Believe it or not, back in the day, it was actually cheaper for them to put hardwood in and finish it than it was for carpet. Carpet was a premium item back in the day, in the early 1900s to 1950s and 60s. And then once the carpet got cheaper, of course, the builders went with that and they put carpet in. So just make sure you're looking for it. It's a nice thing to have. Everybody wants the hardwood floors on their rehabs. Heavy stains on your hardwood, most likely that'll mean you'll have to go with a darker stain when refinishing. So if you're at $1.50 a square foot to refinish just a hardwood with no stain, add 50 cents a square foot because you're going to need to stain it. Check your ceramic floors for missing grout. Most likely the cause is the tile is loose or the subfloor is moving underneath, in which case you'll have to reset that tile at minimum and regrout it. If your subfloor is moving, it looks like you got a lot of floor tile that's popping, there's really no good fix for that, guys. You're probably going to have to take that ceramic floor out and screw your subfloor down and then get yourself a good backer board and retile it or figure out another type of floor. And then the vast majority of those old 8x8 vinyl tiles, those are a lot of them contain asbestos. So good rule of thumb, if you run into it, just encapsulate it or go over it. You're allowed to do that. As long as it's there and it's not being disturbed, it's not an issue. Kind of an out of sight, out of mind thought process there. But technically speaking, if you want to have it removed and get rid of it, you should be calling an abatement company. Does everybody do that? No. Do I do that? Probably not, but just throw that out there so you know about it. It can be a good point to bring up with owners on some negotiations. Humps and waves and carpet. If the carpet's clean, everything looks pretty decent, but you're seeing some waves and some wrinkles, it doesn't necessarily mean that the carpet's wore out. It just needs to be re-stretched. Chances are they didn't use a power stretcher when they put it in. You have a guy come in for $150 to $200 for a smaller house. He'll re-stretch all the carpet down for you, and you're good to go. So look for that hardwood closets. They don't take the carpet into the closets a lot of times. Walls, paint, plaster. So a rough evolution of walls for St. Louis. So there's 3 different wall types that we see pretty often out here. The first being plaster on wood lath. It's fairly easy to demo, somewhat easy to repair. You'll see that in homes from the early 1900s to probably the late 40s, maybe up into the 50s. From the 40s to 70s, you're going to see plaster on wire lath. So basically what that is, imagine chicken wire stapled to a wall and then you rub your plaster coat over it. It's extremely hard to get off the wall, guys. It's a pain in the ass. So if you run into it and you can tell that you have it, if you're planning on demoing the house out, maybe add a little bit more in there for the demo. And it's a little bit tougher to repair. It can be repaired, but it's just not as fun to deal with. And then from the 70s on, you've got drywall, easy to demo, easy to repair. Everybody knows about drywall, but it's the most prone to mold. So if you're noticing some moisture issues in places, your bathrooms and your kitchens and whatnot, that's going to be the most likely material to have mold on it, especially behind the wall. And reason being is your drywall is gypsum with a paper face. That paper face is food for mold, and that's how that mold's going to grow. And then paint, there's not a lot to say about paint other than your lead-based paint. Every house built prior to 1978 has the potential of having it. When you go to sell, all sellers have to fill out their lead-based paint disclosure. Law requires that you disclose if you are certain that there is lead-based paint in the home. Here's the deal, guys. To be certain, you have to be a professional or have to have it professionally tested. If you haven't, you just have an idea that there might be lead-based paint. So in which case, you're just going to check the box that you're unaware that there's any paint in it. And then rules for paint, my personal rules. 1, it always costs more than you think. I don't know why, but painting costs always seem to sneak up on you, especially by the time you paint every surface and you work on the trim and the doors. Keep it neutral. The 2 colors that I use are Sherwin-Williams Bennington Gray for a tan. That's the color that was in Sharp. And Sherwin-Williams Agreeable Gray, which is actually the gray that Nick's wife wants to use in their house. And then small areas, paint those very light colors, probably almost a white. And in your basements, paint your floors, paint your walls, and paint your ceilings. It just makes them feel super clean and very bright, especially on older homes. When you walk down there, you feel like you could go down, as Nick said, you can go down in your socks and do your laundry and you don't have to worry about it.
Walk down your socks basement.
Yep.
I just want to real quickly here because we are going over here, guys. If you need to run off, we normally try to keep this for an hour, but I want to make sure that we finish all the material that we have here today. So if you do have,
I think we're done, Nick.
What's that?
I think we're pretty close to being done.
Okay, cool.
I think that was it.
Well, let's do this then. Let me make sure we have any questions here, and then let's just finish the 1 or 2 slides you got left here, and then we'll take questions. Well, since we were talking about floors, but this was back then, Mark LeBeau writes, recently I saw refinished hardwood floors with swirl marks everywhere. What did they do wrong? And it was their sander that had an issue.
Yeah, it was. I've seen this, just a house that I looked at last week. It was actually a rehab, and I was looking at it with one of my buyers, and you walk in and you could tell that they didn't know what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple different types of sanders. There's a drum sander and there's a disc sander. If you're seeing swirls, chances are it was probably a disc sander. It's basically a giant orbital sander, and they didn't have the speed set correctly, or they weren't using the correct coarse grit on their sander pad. And that one probably isn't too hard to refinish and get rid of. But in the case that I saw, they were using a drum sander, and they actually let the sander sit there so long that it created dimples in the floor at the edges of the floor, and it kind of streaked it, and it made it look pretty bad.
You know,
even the average Joe, the average person could see it.
Yeah,
So.
it's interesting because I've seen that a lot, and you're right. It's someone that just doesn't know what they're doing, or honestly just doesn't care, or it might be faulty equipment too. And a lot of times you'll see it where maybe the floor looks good, but around the edges, you'll see the swirl marks, and they'll use like a hand sander to get up close and in corners and things like that. And if they don't know what they're doing, or if they've got equipment that's not balanced right or something, you're going to see those swirl marks pretty bad. And if you see the swirl marks and you see divots kind of waviness, it's because they let the sander go down a little bit farther than they needed to in that spot. And yeah, the only way to fix that is just to have the right guy do it and go. You got to completely start over and get that done.
Yeah, and sometimes if the divots are deep enough, there's just not enough wood left to even do it.
Right.
So we'll get into this later, guys, but that gets into really knowing how you're going to pay your contractors and how your contract's set up. Because if that happens to you, the last thing you want to have done is, hey, I already paid this guy 50, 75, 80% of what he was charging for this floor. Now I don't have anything to go back on him to get the money back when he did a horrible job.
Remind me, I've got a story on that. When we get into, I've got a story on that, and it's interesting how it played out. But let's finish up here today. So, Craig, what else you got here?
I think that's it. That's just a clean basement. That's the basement at Shark. And attics. Check the attics. At least at one point before you buy, check the attics, look for leaks, fire damage, etc. Make sure all the trash and belongings are out, or note it so that you know to get it out. Confirm your plumbing vents are penetrated the roof, also your bathroom vents. Shine a flashlight on your joist or your ceiling, look for cracks, separations. Slab homes, they'll often have air handlers in the attic. You want to look for a drain line off the condenser, off the coil. Make sure that that's draining correctly. And then look for daylight. That could be an entry for pests and vermin. And then you can just check your insulation levels. If you have no insulation, you're probably going to have to do some kind of insulation. So that's it. We're good. Sorry it took so long, guys. There's just a lot to go through.
No, there is, and I'm glad that we did, because we'll probably be going over a little bit this month. But we want to make sure we get the information. So it's not as long as we're not going 4 or 5 hours, then we're going to be okay, Craig. So let's say, just to kind of wrap this up, let's say that you've walked through the house, you've looked at all those things, and you know, what are you noting down? Like, what are you writing down? Do you have like a checklist that you write down from, or are you just taking a notebook and saying, I'm going to have to do electric, or are you taking pictures, or what are you doing?
So we'll get into this a little bit next week with the estimating side. Before I even go to the house, I've pulled the tax record and I've kind of preliminary filled out my estimate sheet on what it's going to cost to get this house done, what I need to buy it at. And then from there, I'll just walk through my estimate as I'm walking through the house, and I'll make notes on different quantities and the stuff that comes up. And I try to photograph everything that I see that's an issue, and then kind of get an overall shot of a room so that I can remember it. Because sometimes the owners are there, sometimes they're not. If it's a wholesale deal and the guy just gave me the code, that's kind of nice. I can take my time, and then I can go back and I can really put the screws to it on my estimate and try to get things as accurate as I can. But yeah, just walk through, take notes, take photos, and then make sure you're capturing everything that you can. But yes, a checklist is essential, and a method of reviewing a home so that you can get in and out quickly.
So one of the things that we are working for on that, and I'm not sure when we'll be able to roll it out this week or this month, is the estimating portion of REI Black Book, to have that more dialed in, more towards a more foundational approach on how to do estimating on home repairs and things like that. So we're working on a template for that that's going to be applied to all Inner Circle members, and only for Inner Circle members REI Black Book accounts. And that would be more of a baseline for us to kind of work from, so that we kind of, it's easier for us to go in and say what price per square footage is on this, if we can all agree that, hey, we can use these contractors and this is the range that we're going to be in, you know, and have it reflected for St. Louis pricing. So, all right, cool. So, yeah, I mean, at the very least, you take notes of, okay, I think I'm going to have to do the electric and service entry lines. I see some knob and tube, so I'm going to have to clean that up. HVAC looks fine. It's only a couple years old, but it's going to need to be cleaned and serviced. You know, at least, you know, you make those notes so that you can go back, and when you're in front of your computer, because you might only have 5 minutes there at the house to do all this stuff, but so that you can go back and then dial it in and go, at least go from your notes and be able to have a really good, accurate representation of what you want to do.
Yeah.
So
photos help. Photos are awesome, especially when you get back to the office. You can open those up and you'll catch stuff that you didn't remember.
Yep. Yep. So going through this, I mean, obviously this is a pretty methodical approach here, and you want to make sure that you're not gonna miss something on the rehab that's going to cost, you know, a $1,200 mistake here, or a $4,000 mistake here, or an $800 mistake here. Things.
Correct. There's always going to be stuff that comes up that you didn't miss or you didn't plan for, but the goal is to nail all the big items and then kind of make some assumptions on the small items. And really, like I mentioned before, you kind of get a wash when you start buying out your construction, which we'll get into on your highs and lows, and with the goal being to be even out close to what you had estimated. So, but yeah, you want to look for those big ticket items, and that's mainly why I start on the exterior of the house and then move into the basement and the foundation, because those are typically where your really expensive items are going to occur. Roofs, siding, windows, and then foundation issues, and your furnace and your utilities. Those are kind of your big ticket items. And then you'll get into a kitchen. You can tell pretty quickly what you want to do with the kitchen, if you want to replace it or not. But yeah, those first two steps are where you're going to catch your big cost items.
And you know what, a lot of it stuff is too is it really is learning from how other people do stuff. I mean, because you know, a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, I've got a lot of vision. I can walk into a house and see what it can be done afterwards." Well, yeah, I mean, you can, but you got to understand what you got to be able to see a bunch of before and afters and be in the homes to be able to see that, yeah, that will be a correct fix and that will work. And yes, just
right.
Cabinets will make this kitchen look brand new. You know, I mean, you need to have the experience and see that kind of stuff to know that that's going to be correct. Because the last thing you want to do is do that and then have it not look right and then have to go ahead and just replace the cabinets all over again. You know.
Yep.
So.
I guess the last thing I would leave them with, if you're going to write a list down and you're just starting off, start with 3 columns. You've got your must-dos, your should-dos, and your could-dos. Your must-dos are anything you need to pass occupancy to make it livable. Your should-dos are anything that bring it up to par on what the neighborhood is at. And then your could-dos are anything that may be a value play to make you better in the market, or maybe to push the market a little bit and add more value to the house and make it sell faster. So that's another way, and it's something that you should be thinking about when you walk through, and it helps break it down a little bit better and a little bit easier to look at.
Craig, thanks for your time today, man. We've had a good time, guys. Look forward to next week's webinar as well. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please just let us know. Craig, thanks so much, man. Go out and rock it today, okay?
No problem. Appreciate it. I'll try to keep the next one a little bit shorter.
Oh, no, you're fine, man. Talk to you soon, guys.
Thanks, guys.